Thanks everyone for coming together, and three Shane and Eric, you and I got on last week to talk about episodes 1 and 2, but Ted, our former advisor at VSU, the VSU Spectator, welcome, and how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Neil. I'm going to start out by apologizing for one thing. I am not caught up. I've watched the first two, but I didn't get to the ones last night. But to make up for it, I've got some good old-time Michael Jordan stories from way back.
Awesome.
And one artifact that I think you guys are going to be impressed with that I'm going to break out in a few minutes here.
Awesome. We're very excited to hear about your expertise. And before doing this, you mentioned obviously being living through like Michael Jordan playing, and also self explain that you were not an MJ like fan. You were actually rooting against him. So
always. I always rooted against him.
So where were you during his career, like in the beginning to the end, kind of like what were the different stages, and like who were you rooting for at the time?
I will tell you the root of my Michael Jordan hatred. First I'll tell you the first time. Well, I guess the first thing was, Michael Jordan's only a few years older than me, and I grew up in the D.C. area, and my dad had taught at Georgetown, so I was a huge Georgetown fan. And used to go to the games even before Ewing. Like when they played, Georgetown used to play in a little 3,000 seat gym, and they were starting to be good. It was like the beginning of the Big East, and then they got Ewing, and then Ewing was a freshman the same year Jordan was a freshman, actually. And if you remember that game, they went to the finals, and Jordan actually that was in the episode, right?
In the first where Jordan hits the shot.
Right. So everyone hated North Carolina, like it was like the Yankees, you just hated them. Yeah. So you hated North Carolina. And then he did that, and he won that game. And then he was great. He was a freshman that year, and he was really good. But then, as it showed in the documentary, then he became the best player. Pretty soon after that, he was the best player in the country. And so 2 years later, this is where my artifact comes in. You're going to be impressed with this. So my dad had a friend who had season tickets, and that's how we used to go to the Georgetown games. So, they were top five for the next 4 years. The whole time they had Patrick Ewing, they were great. So 2 years later, North Carolina got knocked out, and Jordan is out. Final four, the final game ended up being Houston and Georgetown. That was the year Georgetown won. I can't remember the other two teams, but my dad's friend went to the Final Four. Jordan wins Player of the Year. They bring him out at halftime of the game, or something like that, to award him the National Player of the Year award. And my dad's friend is there on the side of the court, and Jordan comes off the court after getting National Player of the Year, and he signs this autograph.
That's
nice. Official. So this is, and I don't know how well you can see it, but this is the Jordan autograph. It's on a Georgetown Hoya ticket envelope, and it's got the date. That was the date of it might have been the semifinal games. I can't remember, but so I
wow, that's awesome.
I completely forgot I had. I found it in my stuff just like a year or two ago, and I was like, I can't believe I still have this, So I got it appraised, and I tried to sell it for a while, but then I just.
Well, glad you did it because it came in handy for right now.
Right, I'm glad I saved it. So I have that, but I didn't like Jordan, which is probably why I forgot about it. But so I was still, I was probably maybe I was in middle school or something like that. And then the very next year, and this was like the coolest thing that happened to me, one of the coolest things as a kid. So this is the 80s. This is while NBA teams still traveled, commercial airlines. They didn't have their own planes. I think the Bulls might have started that a couple years later. But so I'm in the airport. We're just like going on a family vacation to visit my grandparents. We're in Dulles Airport in DC, and this is 1984, and Jordan's a rookie, and the Bulls walk through the airport. And it's just, that's the age when you're like, you just love, that's all your world is professional athletes and everything. And all of a sudden there they are.
It's real. Like they
right.
are.
Right. And they're just enormous too. Like when you watch them play, like they're all with themselves, but when you see them walk through an airport, and this was, so Jordan's rookie year. And they had, Orlando Woolridge, which was like one of their best players. I guess some of these guys were in the documentary. They showed when he was a rookie, and he was kind of, he was great already, but he wasn't the star, But I remember he was wearing jeans and a black golf shirt and a like kind of some sort of a tweed blazer. They had some sort of a dress code, and I was just like, I can't believe that I just saw the Chicago Bulls. The whole team just walked right in front of me.
So in that moment, are you still not rooting for MJ in that moment? Are you still like, man, I really want you to like lose like your next game, or like, No,
I still wanted to lose. No, I was a diehard Bullets fan. That was my team other than pro team. So but I loved watching. That's what I loved about the beginning of the documentary was that time, when he was just, I like that era when, he was great, but it was still Bird and Magic and those.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, no, I really like that part of the documentary too. Like when the Bulls weren't good, right? It's like that pre-phase for sure.
Yeah, like when everyone's kind of like, we know who he is, we know who he's going to be, but he's not there yet. So like, take us through kind of, as Jordan like kind of matures and gets older, like what was like, what stories do you recall, or what from The Last Dance like was new to you, and what like was kind of like revealed through watching that?
Well, all of it, like all of the kind of general NBA stuff is all stuff that I just hadn't thought about in so long, like I didn't remember, like I don't really remember the chain of events that well. I remember the 63-point game against the Celtics was incredible. Mm-hmm. And then like, I guess what was the new episode is them going against the Pistons.
Yeah.
And I remember that they just couldn't get by the Pistons. And I loved that era of it.
So the fourth one, go a little bit more into Rodman's history, like that whole background, him with the Pistons. They're like, them going up against the Bulls, going up against the Pistons, and Rodman then coming on to like being part of like the Bulls. And I kind of like how like they kind of explain both of the stories individually and at the same time. Like, kind of like Rodman being involved with both teams. The Pistons not shaking their hands after like the sweep in, what was it, 90, or is it 91?
Yeah.
So that was the year that they ended up winning the one in 91.
Right.
And then episode 4 is about Phil Jackson's past, which I thought was just like fascinating about like him, like because they said he coached in Puerto Rico before even coming into like the CBA, and there was they cited that the mayor like shot one of the Puerto Rican officials in the leg, and
that's wild.
And the suspension that he got was that he just couldn't attend home games for the rest of that year. So yeah, I was just like, I get where Phil Jackson's coming from now.
Yeah, that was a good little nugget for sure. Because I knew about his playing days, but I didn't know about his early coaching days.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, like so I, you were also covering sports during this time. So like, where were you kind of during Jordan's rise, and what do you remember as far as 80s, 90s, and kind of that whole era?
Well, so yeah, I was a little kid when he started. I mean, thinking about it's just like I hadn't thought about it in this terms until I kind of, because the way that the documentary moved back and forth in time, by the time the season of The Last Dance happened, I mean, I was I was your age and in your stage of your career, kind of like I was at a newspaper by then. The last few years, like the last 3 Jordan championships. So like a lot of time, definitely took a lot of time. You know, he had a long career when you count college and everything.
Right.
So by the time the year of The Last Dance happened, I remember by then I was just, come on, can somebody please beat this guy? You know, it was like the finals every year. I mean, I'm always rooting for someone, like I got tired of the finals the last few years when it was just LeBron and the Warriors every year. It's just,
Right.
that's how I felt back in that era. When he went to baseball and he was like striking out all the time, I loved all of that.
Jordan's not good at something.
Yeah, that. But I mean, still, it was still, you got to admire it. He's riding the bus and like, handing out $100 bills to like all the young players and everything.
Yeah.
Well, it's so, because years back, like me and my family, we do. I mean, this year we can't do it, our summer baseball trip, but like before all this, we used to do minor league baseball trips, and so we went once to the Birmingham Barron Stadium, and kind of like, so I kind of like got to see like where Jordan played. But how did you feel about like the 2 years that he was gone? Like, did you feel like in that time that the Rockets were? Do you think that do you feel like Jordan would have won 8 straight had he stayed, or do you think like those 2 years? What was kind of like the feel of then?
I think, yeah, I think he would have kept winning. I think he would have. I mean, they were all still in their prime. Those 2 years, trying to like, would you guys have been that you were not like? I can't place if you were already basketball fans during those years. Probably not yet, right? So those 2 years were terrible. I mean, it was like, the scores were like 60-49 and stuff. It was like, and it was just, the Knicks like just pounding on people. And so I think that the Bulls probably would have kept on winning if he had stuck around. Who knows? It would 8 straight. But I mean, then maybe he wouldn't have gotten all the way to the 98. That's probably what would have happened.
Yeah. Shane, did you?
Yeah, I think there was a couple things during that whole thing. Number one, I feel like to see Jordan versus Hakeem would have been great, because I mean, nobody really had an answer for Hakeem. Hakeem had ate up Shaq for one of those years. I think it was '95, where he gave Shaq kind of his comeuppance into the league, on the big skate on the big stage. And it would have been an interesting matchup. I think it would have been closer than people thought. I mean, if anything, they would have gotten maybe 7 of 8. Had Jordan not played, I think Houston would have took him at least 1 year, because they had a lot of big men on that team, but none of them I don't think would have been able to stop Hakeem. I mean, I think what 94, 95. I mean, was that before they got Rodman?
94, 95.
There was the documentary doesn't.
I don't think they got Rodman until Jordan got back, right?
I think it was that.
Yeah, I think it was 96.
So, what episode 3 goes? Like, they go into Rodman's stint with like the Spurs, but it's almost like not long enough to really kind of like get a feel for a sense for what. It's almost like they kind of really gloss over it, because one thing I was commenting, and it's funny. I was watching Bill Simmons like his recap, and they kind of like mentioned the same thing. How it seemed like they didn't really go into like Rodman's days with the Spurs, and I would have liked to get like his teammates' reactions from that time, because it seems like that was when he was like at his craziest and at his wildest.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And he's talking about how he's like truly this great teammate, And like this is what like Simmons and Russillo were kind of talking about was like, well, I don't think David Robinson really felt that. I don't think that that the Spurs really felt that you were such a great teammate. That's why they traded you. Like they wanted to get rid of you. So I felt like they get fleshing that out a little bit more.
I mean, that whole Rodman could be 2 hours more. You know what I mean? Like they got to make sure it stays on the path too. Like that Vegas night. I mean, that could be an hour documentary on itself. You know what I mean? That vacation.
Yeah. How do you feel now about trying to go to your boss and see if they'll just let you leave for 48 hours?
I know, right? It's funny because you could never do that in today's like NBA, right? With the social media and everything now. You just could not,
oh yeah, he couldn't be off the grid.
Yeah. It would be impossible.
Yeah, that I don't know how well it would play off if you just say, hey, I need to get away to Vegas for 48 hours so I can do all the drugs I want and get as drunk as possible. It definitely wouldn't be 48 hours, just like Rod.
Yeah, he was a crazy transformation, wasn't he? Because he was like a choir boy when he came.
Right, yeah.
If anything, San Antonio probably bridged that gap. I mean, you had Detroit where he was all clean cut, and he was just a young dude, and then he gets the little stint in San Antonio. Everybody's like, "Whoa!" Like this guy flips out, and then he becomes like the man with Chicago. I think San Antonio probably was just kind of like that pit stop in the middle that led to, the Rodman we know now that, is the character and everything else.
Yeah, so the documentary kind of goes into, and like the director was mentioning on Jalen Jacoby. I forget Jason Ayer. He had this comment that I wrote down that was like, Rodman was kind of like that kid who always needed someone to kind of like, almost be a parent. And when during like the Pistons years, he had stability within that system, and kind of and them like because he always just, as he says, he always just wanted to be loved and really like respected for like what he did, and he has that thing with in like the parking lot in Detroit that makes him like trade him away, and he loses that sense of like a belief system, and like people kind of like that he just wanted to fit in there, and like they traded him away, so he goes to San Antonio, and I remember like Madonna's the one who tells him like be you, like be free, like don't be who they don't be what they're telling you should be. So he starts like freeing up and starts going crazy, and it's like the Bulls make the trade for him because they think that because they have MJ and Pippen in place, like he'll respect them, and that's what happens. Like, which is another one of those like crass decisions of him kind of seeing like the fit, like the fit really working out.
And I think the biggest part is seeing how it develops with the relationship between Phil and Rodman. Because Phil, if anybody could understand a guy like Dennis, it would be Phil. Because Phil was kind of a wild child when he played in New York, and with him kind of being a little bit of a therapist in a way as a coach. I feel like him and Dennis really clicked in that way, and I feel like that more so than just dealing with Scottie and Mike, like that relationship with him and Phil is kind of what unlocked that extra element of the Bulls that we came to know like in the late 90s.
And that's what I loved about the Phil Jackson part was like it did a really good job to like illustrate how Phil Jackson really impacted that team, because they go from Doug Collins, who, I mean, me and Shane have had this conversation about Doug Collins before about like I love Doug Collins. I've always been like, who would I rather have? It was between him and Hubie Brown for announcing a game. Like I don't know who I would choose, but that whole like scenario of like Phil replacing Doug Collins makes me think of how Steve Kerr replaced Mark Jackson, and kind of like what ended up happening from, you know, it wasn't a bad job that like what the predecessor did. It kind of like set the tone for like for them finding success, but then you make the coaching change that kind of like, is that what really puts them over the top and really turns them into a championship contender. It's interesting how, Kerr is playing for Phil Jackson. That move happens, and then Kerr ends up going to replace Mark Jackson later in his career, and has the same kind of effect with the Warriors.
Yeah, I think you could say, right, like Collins like laid that foundation, right, for sure. I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, that triangle offense, though, I like how they went into that as well, how management wanted that to be pushed, you know what I mean, that plan. And Phil was kind of not the guinea pig, but, he took the promotion, right, knowing what was expected, to run that offense. But clearly it turned out to be pretty successul, right? So
right.
Pretty sure James Dolan watched that and he's like punching the air. He brought in Phil, and then they basically tried to do the same thing with the Knicks,
right.
like from the top down, telling Jeff Hornacek, you're going to run the triangle. I don't care how it's going to get done. I don't care if you don't even have the personnel to do it. Just make it happen.
And I was right. So once again, so for these Zooms, there's a 40-minute time limit, and we've got 5 minutes left. And so before this, we were talking about the triangle offense and how that was being presented. Again, going back to that, like I loved their explanation, kind of like the overhead view that they showed of Phil explaining how the movement was created off of one pass, and that it set up like all these different options.
Well, I mean, with the triangle, I mean, I think, I think it did a good job of how they introduced it, because a lot of it was just Michael, and then it was Michael and Scotty and all that. And you kind of see their kind of individual brilliance. But then introducing the triangle kind of gave it a new wrinkle. It was like, okay, these guys are all-stars on their own, and they lead this team, but if they want to go to a higher level, there has to be a change in philosophy. There has to be some type of thing that takes them to a higher level. I think Phil coming in with the triangle, the whole thing is completely predicated on how, like, does it fit Michael? Is Michael willing to kind of acquiesce to the system? Like how that all works. I think, getting that buy-in was crucial. And I think that in its essence really put Phil on the map, even though he got it from Tex Winter. So him getting it from Tex and then using that to create this championship dynasty, I think the way they introduced it really kind of oriented people in the importance of that offense and how it can work for teams when they buy into it.
Right.
No, I agree too, for sure. I feel like they could win another 30 minutes on the triangle, just, kind of breaking it down. Because Tex always seemed like he was that guy in the shadows who really didn't talk or anything, but was just drawing up diagrams and plays.
Right, because
everybody has a guru, man. Everybody.
Right, exactly.
It makes you wonder why Tex wasn't ever, a coach, or like why, because I mean, those who know basketball know like it wasn't Phil Jackson's offense, but that's kind of like how it gets portrayed that, Phil was like, they connect Phil with like the triangle, but it's really Tex, so it's kind of like. Is Tex like really like a coach, or is he kind of just like a basketball like recipe guy that's just like a recipe generator?
That's all. That's really cool. I think. I don't know. Like that question comes up with different people. Like you ask it about Tex. I used to think about it when my guy Dirk was playing, because he had Holger, who was like his shooting guru and his coach and all that. Mm-hmm. And I think they said Mark Cuban offered like him a spot on the staff, and he said no.
I remember because there's a good Dirk documentary a while back that kind of showed was Hoger like the guy that he was like working out with.
Yeah.
And, like
Yeah.
yeah, because I remember during that documentary they were just in some like rec center and he was doing all these like ballet moves that like kind of like defined like Dirk's footwork. That was really like the predator. That was whole because he kind of moved like he kind of moved like a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Holger was kind of like a mad scientist. I mean, I think that's probably the best way to describe him because he kind of took Dirk to that other level, but he was doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, he had him doing like he was rowing and he did fencing and he played guitar and saxophone and all that mess. So Tex being Phil's kind of coaching guru. I think there's probably a book laying around somewhere just about Tex and his relationship with Phil too.
Yeah.
No, I bet there is because he came from Germany, I think, right? As far as Dirk's guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, but Tex though for sure. It's like the hidden guy for sure. And then you see how it goes with the Lakers. I mean, they just have the players to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it helps when you have 4 of the top 15 players to ever play
Right,
all on your team. I mean,
right.
that makes everything look good,
So before Ted, when you were younger, like so when the Bulls when that whole deal went down with bringing in Phil Jackson, first of all, like how do you recall that? Because like in the documentary they kind of like they kind of just go, oh, Phil kind of like just replaced, and they don't go too much in depth about the whole thing. And so like how do you remember it? Like
I don't have any great memories of it. Like I don't remember it being Michael forcing out Collins as much. Okay. Like, I mean, when that happened with the Lakers, with Magic Johnson got rid of Paul Westphal, I mean, that was a huge story, and like now that would be like, it's like barely make the front page now when the best player fires the coach. It happens all the time. But when Magic did it, it just completely, everyone loved Magic and he was, the new face of the NBA and, that's always smiling and just like no one didn't like Magic. And then he fired the coach and everything kind of changed. I don't quite remember it being that much like when the Bulls did it.
So you don't remember like Chicago or anyone being like being upset over the move that did you feel like they kind of understood like Collins was good for the moment, but just it kind of wasn't the guy to get them over the top?
My feeling was my memory of it, and that's why I'm happy. I'm glad they had this documentary. I'm enjoying it because it's kind of bringing things back into focus. Because now it's just like way in the rearview mirror, and But my memory of it was that like everyone kind of knew Jordan was the best player in the league pretty soon after he joined the league, and it was just like a matter of time. Like when are they going to get the right coach? When are they going to get the right players around him? And that Phil Jackson was just kind of like, one of the pieces of the puzzle that was all kind of swirling around Jordan, and they were locking him into place. And once they got Phil in there,
right,
that was one of the final pieces.
This goes back to Shane kind of bringing up about, Phil's always, and we talked about this last week, how, we were saying like, is Kerr a great coach because he's always had great talent? Is Phil truly a great talent just because he's had so much great talent? But like this kind of goes back to like the triangle offense being, and I think I remember Kobe saying, I think around 2009, he was like kind of I think it was Kobe. He was talking about the triangle offense and how like one of the things that makes the triangle really work is when you have everyone. First of all, it requires everyone buying into it, and it requires everyone to have the kind of basketball IQ to like know how to like move without the ball. And so like I think common denominator is that it takes a team with like exceptional talent. Like you wouldn't, because I mean they tried to do it with the Knicks, and this is what I was thinking about earlier: is why wouldn't it have worked with the Knicks if Phil is looking at MJ and gets him to buy into taking a lesser role, and he gets Kobe to buy in the same way, and then you've got Carmelo, with Amari Stoudemire, and he's looking at that combination, going, well, I did it with Michael, and I did it with Kobe. Can I do it with Carmelo? And like if I can get that to work, then I can see like the whole Carmelo and Amari Stoudemire combination kind of being like, I could see that being like, the foundation of the triangle. But I think this goes back to like the whole idea that, Phil got, and Eric, you were mentioning how in that series that Michael starts passing to Paxson and he starts hitting those shots and he sees what being selfless starts to do when he doesn't want to be the one taking the shot all the time. It's kind of like, I think the whole common thing is having players who will accept being less in order to make the triangle work.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, like, I think that was the knock on Collins, right? Like, the Bulls were having some success, but, like, that ISO ball, like, it's easier to defend that, right? Because, like, the Bulls, I mean, the Pistons did really good about just, kind of trapping Jordan and, you know what I mean? Because once, I mean, like they mentioned, the triangle really flourished when Pippen started to really get going and everybody else. Like, I mean, that's how you really started to win those titles like that, because, Jordan can't do it. It's easy to defend one guy, but when you got to kind of space it out, that makes problems.
Yeah.
Guys, looks like I'm going to have to check out. Bedtime, I'm being called. Thanks for this was fun.
Yeah,
good
thank
to see
you so
you,
much.
Ted.
It was really good.
I'm looking forward to the rest of this documentary now that you guys have warmed it up for me a little bit.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to learning more about all that you have in as a writer, and and
I'm gonna make sure you guys all get to touch this one day. Next time, I'll bring it.
For sure.
All right.
Good to see you, Ted.
Thanks, guys.
that was fun. I'm really glad. We Ted came on, but
that was his TED talk.
yeah, that was the TED talk.
Right. Yeah.
And I loved his artifact. That was just a classic Ted to like have something like that.
Yeah. It's always something a little like, it's always something a little funny, a little odd.
Right. Always, man.
I remember like classes like doing like this photojournalism class, and like at the top of the class you'd always like hint something like, ooh, we have like an award to give out, or like someone's gonna be walking away with like a prize.
And it would be like an old like stamp or something.
But everyone wanted the stamp. You wanted. You would leave his photojournalism class and go to the newsroom for layout night and be like, I got Ted's stamp.
That's true. That's so funny.
It is. That's awesome.
But was there anything that you guys like wrote down, or had you guys had any questions like you wanted to bring up?
One thing I found out that I didn't like, I never really knew. I had no idea Detroit swept LA in 1989.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we were just talking about that last night. We were like, damn, was it 4-0?
I had to like pause the TV and rewind. I was like, wait a minute, 4-0.
What year are we talking?
We're talking
9. They apparently swept the Lakers in the finals.
Well, it's so funny because there's so much about this era of basketball I really want to like really, really get into. Like, I kind of just want to like really do a whole deep dive into this whole era so I can like really connect the dots. But like when you hear about the Bad Boys Pistons, it's always about the Bulls. You never I've never really, in my recollection, it's like I never knew who they played after.
Yeah.
And I think when you bring that up, that's kind of like the surprising thing, is like that's my connection to the Bad Boys Pistons. It is the Bulls.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lakers, they completely ran out of gas, man. Like, they swept the 3 teams before they played the Pistons in that finals, like, completely just buzzed out. Like, but yeah, man, that's crazy. The Pistons, man, they had their time, man. It was short, but
Yeah.
they had their time. That backcourt, Isaiah and Dumars, is still one of the best ever.
They get the bad rap for like their physical play, but I don't think enough people kind of like talk about them as just like a team.
The Bad Boys.
Yeah, because I think talking about them as just like position players and like talking about like Isaiah and like who they were, just like on the court.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that was kind of the theme for a while, Detroit. Even like 04, with the Rip and Chauncey. It's not like they had like these flashy, really like – I mean, obviously Isaiah was really good, but he was – outside Isaiah, I mean, it's not like they had really like high-profile guys, you know what I mean? It's like they were just super tough.
Dumars was great, and, Lambeer was nice as a big guy, and, Isaiah was he was kind of the straw that stirred the drink there.
Right.
But then everybody else just kind of filled in, and then Chuck Daly. I think that was the X factor.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Daly was amazing.
Yeah,
why do you feel like the Pistons decided to go that route to become the Bad Boys? Like, was it just because of being in Detroit, or was it because
I think they had guys that were, they had guys that were big and tough and physical, and they realized athletically they probably wouldn't match up with a lot of these teams. Mm-hmm. And so they knew that they were bigger and tougher, and so that was their way of figuring out how to control the action in their favor. It's like basically trying to play if all of us 3, and we grab James and somebody else and we go over to the Y and we play a bunch of old guys, I guarantee somebody's going to get an elbow to the ribs or somebody's going to get their shirt grabbed.
Right. Like, exactly. What you lack in athleticism, right?
Yeah, that's how they even the odds,
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, when you have Rick Mahorn and Lambeer, I mean, you gotta be more physical for sure, because those guys aren't the most athletic kind of guys,
Are you surprised that Jordan didn't get hurt through all that?
Well, I mean,
lucky
he did, but
because it maybe
you mean like serious injury though, like
right, because there's a comment about, I forgot who mentioned it, but like how back then it was kind of like how the NBA wanted to sell Michael, but the Pistons were in their way. And the NBA wasn't really doing anything to really like. You would think like in this present day, how stars get, get calls, like LeBron gets calls, like the star players get their calls. Like that wasn't happening back then, and the NBA wanted to sell Jordan, and like were doing nothing. They were doing nothing to really thwart the Pistons from doing what they wanted to do, and you kind of wonder like what would have happened had they actually hurt Jordan to the point like he got knocked out of a game or like had to like miss a postseason. You kind of just wonder how lucky like Jordan and everyone was that like something didn't actually happen.
Yeah, I think that just that whole idea, I always thought that idea was bogus. I don't like the whole like, oh, he's a star, he should get the calls.
Right.
I've never really agreed with that. Like, I always
that's
feel
how
like
it is, though.
It's supposed to go.
Right, but it's just kind of like the separation between the two eras and how, like, I agree. Like stars, I'm not saying that I think that it's just such a different philosophy back then, to like where we're gonna allow we're gonna allow the play to be physical, and to me, like I was thinking about this whole time, like this is the thing that this is the point that LeBron is hoping right now that people don't, that like this current generation doesn't start accepting, is that it is looking at the physical play back then and starting to go, whoa, like it really was different back then.
And the back in my day crowd that you know they love that. But my thing is, I'm like, if we're looking back at that, like that's not basketball, bro. like
Wait, if you're getting the calls, yeah.
When people are getting like clotheslined, and the best part about it is that all these fights would happen and nobody would get kicked out. They might get fined, but nobody got ejected or nothing like that.
Right.
Yeah, no, there's a thin line, right? Like some of the like the Kirk Rambis and some of those throwdowns and stuff. It's like, all right, man, some of this is a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Somebody gonna get hurt out here.
Yeah, seriously.
At the same time, I feel like the league has softened up though, for sure. But
Well,
it's a thin line.
well so
You really can't bang anymore.
anyway, so we got like 4 minutes to like we could do this again. Do y'all want to wrap this up here, or do you want to like go for maybe another like 10 minutes?
Dude, I wish I could do another, but
Okay.
I gotta finish up some.
So yeah, so we could do this here. So once again, like episodes 3 and 4 kind of like focused on Phil Jackson and Dennis Rodman. Before this, like Michael Jordan's been like a little bit hesitant about what's about to, like what are y'all like looking forward to like in the next few episodes, and what do you think are these the episodes? Do you feel that it starts to go that Jordan starts to be put into a little bit more of a negative light?
I don't know. I think he's just kind of. It could be these first few episodes. I don't know how it'll unfold, but I'm really looking forward to. I think there's an episode, with him and his relationship with Kobe. I really hope that they were able to get Kobe to sit down and talk, because that'll be a sad moment for all of us. So I'm sure we can all cry in.
No, they did. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
It's going to be sad as hell, but it's going to be good.
I just want to continue to just see them highlight some of the – I want to see if they're going to highlight any more players. They've done Rodman and they've done Pippen. I wonder if they're going to dive into, Kukoc a little bit, or are they going to dive into, maybe Longley or Kerr. So I'm curious to see where it kind of goes from here, because I really don't know at this point. I think, like Shane mentioned, maybe the Kobe relationship, but I'm not quite sure now. I guess as they go into deeper, because now you kind of have to start to like, what are we about to get on? We're about to get on 5 and 6 now, so now you have to start to show the arc a little bit,
Right.
kind of start heading towards that end of those finals.
I don't know like what's coming up, but I'm pretty sure there could possibly be maybe Birmingham Barons episode. There could be.
Right.
Mike's never went into any detail really about his relationship with his dad. I'd love to see if they have something like that in store too.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. I forget when the death was though. I think that was after. But yeah, that would be good though. More on his dad. I forget. I like how they brought up early. His brother. How he was like the star basketball player in the house. I thought that was a really good nugget too. So. Yeah, man, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Every Sunday,
Yeah.
I've had to rearrange my work schedule to make sure Sunday nights I'm ready to go. So,
Well, yeah,
it's been cool.
I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think that will start to lend a little bit more towards like kind of like the wrap up the 97, because that is the focus, but kind of getting more into that season. And yeah, but I definitely think like the whole like peppering in more of the backstory. We've got less than a minute here. Like I would love to like get more into this, but like obviously we've got a time constraint. So looking forward to doing this again next week. And so any kind of like final thoughts y'all want to give?
Yeah, man, I look forward to it too. I'll actually maybe take a couple notes on Sunday, so I can maybe offer some more counterpoints too. So
We'll do it. It'll be fun.
Nice. Well, thank you guys so much, and looking forward to doing this again next week.